Awesome. Thanks everyone. Thanks for people who are joining. Thanks for dropping in where you're from. Uh, really looking forward to today's session. What I'm going to do is I'm going to be giving a mix of a talk and a demo of how some of these things, how Morta can be leveraged to help you report on your CDE data. I will be sharing a bit about the context of what we're trying to achieve as a company and where we think we sit. And I will be showing you a bit of a demo. If you have any questions, by the way, please feel free to drop them throughout the talk. I may also at some point ask you all to contribute and help me out with something. Now, just to contextualize, so I'm just about to share screen. It's also really nice to see how many different places we have people from. So today we're going to focus on reporting on CDE data. And I will contextualize it with a bunch of other things that have to happen in information management. But fundamentally, just to give you a bit of a background on myself, I started as an automation and project controls engineer. I worked with one of the largest contractors in the Middle East. I was a civil engineer by background. I then ended up going to Abu Dhabi to work on the Midfield Terminal project, which was the $3.5 billion project. I then spent time on 2 oil and gas projects, one in the UAE and the other in Kuwait. Then went to Cambridge to do my master's in engineering for sustainable development, and then went back to the same company to work with our chief information officer. My job with the chief information officer was largely to focus on setting best practices for use of data and information across the company, especially with a focus on project controls. Now, really, what I observed there is we talk about a lot of challenges within the industry. We talk about things like productivity. We talk about things like building safety. We talk about things like handover and the completeness of information for handover. We talk about carbon, resource use. 2 that I find important are accountability and trust. And by that, I mean, like everything we hear about things like roles and responsibilities tables and just always having to verify and check things, they're all effectively feed back into things like accountability and trust. In many ways, we view these as symptoms to a deeper problem. And the deeper problem really is the fact that we have poor information planning and tracking, which ultimately hampers visibility and hampers performance. Within projects, we have different people who have different questions. If I'm in design, I want to understand the progress of design. If I'm in BIM and information management, I want to understand the completeness and fitness of purpose of information. If I'm in commercials, I want to understand whether my project is within budget. How is my supply chain performing? If I'm in QA and QC, I want to know whether I'm complying with ISO requirements and client requirements. And then if I'm in sustainability management, I want to understand the planned and actual carbon footprint. And do I have all of the needed evidence that I need for my BREEAM certification, for example, or my LEED certification, or any of the others? Now, to answer all of these questions, what we usually have is Excel-based trackers. So when we think about things like information delivery plans, when we think of drawing issue registers, when we think of workforce or mobilization trackers, when we think of sustainability evidencing, a lot of that is usually happening on an Excel-based tracker. That Excel-based tracker usually also has the link.
What doesn't kill you has similar songs on Amazon Music.
Sorry. I think you heard what I said, so I'm really not sure what triggered Alexa, but anyways. So Sorry, I lost my train of thought. Yeah, basically, the Excel-based trackers often have to interface with what's in Word documents. So things like BIM execution plans, design execution plans, project execution plans, quality execution plans, the list goes on, or strategies, for example. On the other side, they have to interface with what's in O&M, with things like O&Ms, health and safety files, information management reports, compliance statements, and the list goes on. Often, the answer for what's in these Excel-based trackers is in other systems, ACC being a primary example of that. But so are Viewpoint, ASite, Aconex, and it goes on. Fundamentally, what all of this means is a lot of the information is disconnected, a lot of it is inconsistent, and then that results in manual processes. And manual processes mean a lot of people are wasting their time in doing administrative tasks that don't really add value. But I think more important is it's impacting the visibility in projects. Now, the way we see it is we should move to a world where we connect information. And if we do that, if we use information and data as mortar, we can change the way that we deliver assets and projects. Rather than having many disconnected trackers, we should connect these up. And then we should be able to pull data from other systems. Things like ACC, ASite, Viewpoint, Aconex, Revisto, and it goes on. I then should be able to report on this, whether it's in things like Power BI and GIS and some kind of AI and so on and so forth. Now, if we do that, that gives us a range of benefits. The first is it helps us reduce risk. It helps us save time, helps us bring consistency and standardization to the way we do things. I think the most important for me is it gives us visibility and insight. That's why information management, in my opinion, and largely, like it's one of the biggest areas where information management can have an impact, like having visibility on where things are at. And it helps us get ready for things like Industry 4.0 and AI and all of the things that are happening there. To get there, we need to manage information effectively. We need things like standards, like ISO 19650. We need information models like IFC, IDS, BCF, and the list goes on. We need classification systems, so things like Uniclass, Omniclass, and others. And then we need systems to help make this happen. But the options that we currently have in the industry aren't working or are hampering this vision at the very least. The first is off-the-shelf point solutions. So you'll see solutions that will say, for example, they'll help you turn your BIM documents into BIM execution plans that are cloud-based. You'll see handover systems. You'll see sustainability systems. You'll see workforce planning and tracking systems. Fundamentally, every one of these is hard-coded to do something very specific in a very specific way. They usually can't be customized. They're usually a silo on their own, and they don't connect well to other systems. There is then a learning curve for every new tool. There are then more systems that have to get on board. And what we're seeing is this also, not only does it result in data fragmentation, but it also comes with a real cost because companies are having to pay for every single one of these systems every single time it comes on. The second is no-code and low-code platforms. So if you've seen things like Monday.com, if you've seen Airtable, Smartsheets, Notion, at the very top end are Palantir. They're very flexible systems. And if I had to choose something and I was on a job, that's what I would be choosing. They are flexible systems, which then means you can actually take out a lot of the kinds of things that currently happen in Word and Excel. You can bring them together, you can connect them with each other, and so on and so forth. But because they're industry agnostic, it then ends up taking a lot of time to do that. It's actually quite challenging to do. They don't typically integrate with other AEC software. You then need to figure out how to set up the process, like how do you implement 19650, for example, or IFC or BCF on any of these systems. And they're not built for project-based collaboration. Where we come in is we see ourselves as sitting somewhere between these two options. We provide highly flexible hubs that helps you connect information in AEC and in the built environment. Rather than having Word and Excel-based resources, you have web-based hubs where all of the teams can come together, can fill in the data that they are responsible for, can view the data that they should be able to see. And then Morta links in with a range of other systems in order to help you automatically track plan versus actual. When we're thinking of competition, usually we're thinking of the horizontal players, the likes of Monday.com, for example. But I think beyond the fact that we integrate with other systems and so on and so forth, and we have the templates that are needed to help you get started, I think one of the most important things is we're collaborative. So the other systems are usually focused on internal workflows, whereas Morta is focused on workflows and projects, which will usually have tens of organizations involved. We're working across all tiers of the supply chain. So we work with owners, we work with consultancies, we work with general contractors, we work with design firms. One of the things that's really important for me is we're also working with supply chain members. So some people see the organizations that we're working with and they assume that we only work with very, very large organizations, and we do. We work on some of the world's largest projects. But we are also working with many supply chain members, and the supply chain members are actually the ones that are getting the most excited about us, because now they can find a platform and a tool that will not just help them with their BIM stuff, but it will also help them in their cost management, it will help them in their design management, it will help them in their quality management, and so their sustainability management. That's both affordable and that's like can be used at scale. So I think that's quite important. Usually everyone starts using the platform to automate tracking on files and information deliverables. So they move things like reference data, responsibility matrices, requirements, project controls, and commercial related trackers. They bring that into the platform. That connects with master trackers like master information delivery plans, which then connects with external solutions like ACT, A-Site, Viewpoint, ProjectWise, and the list goes on. What that then gives is automatically tracking plan versus actual, reducing risk, and near real-time visibility and leading indicators on performance. I like emphasizing this. BIM is not, to me, about just the BIM stuff. So yeah, we want to comply with 19650, but what we really want is to make BIM and information management useful for project delivery. One of the most important things for any C-level exec is cash flow. They want to understand whether they're going to get paid or how much they're going to pay people, and whether they or companies, and whether they should pay them or whether they shouldn't. If you look at any data integration team, they'll usually start by integrating to the finance system. But finance is a lagging indicator. Whether I'm getting paid or whether I'm paying, that's a lagging indicator. That's all a function of delivery. Did I actually deliver my design? Did I deliver my information? And did I deliver the work or not? And by using Morta, what companies end up doing is they automate tracking. And off the back of automating tracking, what that then does is it helps and then moving towards leading indicators on performance, which leading indicators and evidencing effectively that the work that has been done, which then helps ensure that they get paid what they should get paid. Now, in many, we're working with many community members. We're working that use us to achieve various things. I'm just going to go through a few examples very quickly. Jamili from Mace used us to in many ways set the standard in real-time visibility and performance tracking. She was able to take data to standardize an approach to reporting across different CDEs, from A-Site to AConneX to Viewpoint to ACC to Procore. She can bring any of these into Morta. She can create consistent reports and surface the information to the relevant people. And she's able to do that with real-time data. Mariano and Samuel from Mott McDonald are also reporting on CDE data. They've been able to deliver real-time insights from over 500 project team members to over 500 project team members from 30 design disciplines. They're able to save 2 days a week from information managers from doing these administrative tasks. And they were able to track plan versus actual to drive performance. Andrew Waring is using from Digital Gorilla. They're an SME information management consultancy that I think are setting the standard for driving proactive quality assurance in COBie and information delivery. So they were able to create granular validation. They were able to move towards real-time visibility, and they were able to automatically automate basically repetitive administrative tasks. William Baker Jones, who used to be with Babcock, is automating the assurance of IFC data that comes out of models. And that has helped save over 89% of the time from the validation processes, but importantly also move towards continuous real-time process. Kier is using us on over 40 projects. They've now been able to standardize their information delivery planning and tracking and reporting on what's in CDEs. And Andy Bootle from ALEC was able to standardize ISO 19650 resources on the platform, and were now used on all of their projects as well. But he had given a talk in one of the data governance stages, but he talked about a range of other trackers that he's building, from tender trackers to marketing content trackers to workforce trackers to project directories to software registers, and it goes on the platform. Veronique and Megan are another example of community members that also work with SMEs. They're actually an appointed party in ISO terms, so they're supply chain members that were able to build a standardized set of resources for how they would comply with ISO 19650 requirements that they were then used to audit in their kite mark audits. And I believe they're one of the first supply chain members globally to get the kite mark. Now, if you notice, I'm emphasizing people. I think that's really important. Like, one of the reasons why we've gravitated towards them heroes as a community, generally speaking, is we think it comes down to people, not just organizations. It's whether you actually want to make a difference and whether you want to push the boundaries. Some people just want to take a template and they want to use a template and not overly think, to be honest, about how to make a process better. We think we do have the templates, we do make it easy for you to get started, but we think it's very, very important that we're providing a platform where you can then make the changes that you want, you can innovate, you can respond to problems, you can respond to challenges, and you can solve problems. We think that's super important. So these are some examples of some of the templates that we have. So you can see, for example, we have a COBie checker, for instance, where someone can come in and can input a COBie workbook, and then they can get a summary of the compliance of that COBie workbook. And then we can see the tables, for example, that we have within this here. So this is, for example, spaces, and I can see everything that I have in spaces. I can see feedback on my data quality and where I have issues. I have the same thing for components. If I go into something like design management and tracking, you can see there is a range of trackers that we have here, from detailed responsibility matrices to RFI and TQ trackers. And that can either be used to create things within the platform itself, or it can be used to track against the RFIs and TQs and other systems. I can create issue registers. In this case, the issue registers are compliant with BCF, which is a format that comes out of Building Smart. I can track and plan who I have within my project. I can assign competencies for them. I can upload their CVs. I can track their right to work, their security clearances, and so on and so forth. I can create training trackers. So what are my training requirements for different people? And what are my training records for any of these? And I can build certification trackers as well. I may also want to do things like DFMA and material tracking, and so on and so forth. From an information management perspective, we think the most important thing is information delivery planning. So I can bring in things like my file reference, my originators list, my functional breakdowns, my spatial breakdowns, my form, and I can input any of this data here. And you can see from these templates, these are all like they're ready to go for you. I can report on the CDE data. I can create a master information delivery plan, which I can then compare to what's in my actuals. And we'll be seeing an example of this in a second. So this is an MIDP across all disciplines. I can then create a task information delivery plan, and depending on who I am, I will see that. And it goes on. I may have handover and asset information trackers and so on and so forth. Now, what I'm going to do is I want to set up a new hub. I'm going to call it like so. And I'm going to load one of my templates. I want to use for this, I want to use my information delivery planning one. If I'm an organization, I can make my own templates. I can work with that. This will take a minute. You can see this has loaded in. I can now come and I can set this as my homepage. I'm just going to delete this one so that it doesn't bug me. And you can now see I have this here. So this is the template that we were just going through. And you can see within this here, I have these different sections. If I were to use the platform, there is an onboarding checklist. So if you wanted to start a free trial, you can. There's an onboarding checklist for the things that you should do. Load your template, complete your project setup, integrate with CDE, create a view, create a chart. We'll be focusing a lot on these things today. But if you wanted to, you would be able to compare that, what's in the CDE to what's in an information delivery plan. And we'll probably touch on that briefly today as well. Now, if I wanted to report on CDE data, what I can do is I can come here and I can import data from other systems. So usually what you do is you'd go into something like ACC, you'd export the data into Excel, you'd then create a report on that manually. Now, others, what they're trying to do is they will go into Power BI and they want to pull that into ACC. The problem there is that needs more like knowledge of APIs, and it's more of a challenge in order to do that. And then there are problems with Power BI itself because Power BI isn't very well set up for collaboration, for example. So what we've done is we tried to make it very, very easy for you to import data from various systems. So if we take something like ACC, we can import data like what documents have been uploaded, what checklists have been uploaded, what issues, what users, and there's AEC data model. From Viewpoint, we can import documents and tasks. From A-Site, we can import documents and forms. From Aconex, we can import documents and workflows. From Procore, we can import documents, and from Vista, we can import issues. Once I've done that, I can then, I'm just gonna, for the sake of example now, I'm sure many of you use ACC. I'm going to pick a hub, and I'm going to pick a project. Once I've done that, I'm going to sync data. And this can take like a few minutes, depending on the size of the project. But this will then happen automatically on a daily basis. So I don't need to come in and re-import it. It will just import on its own. You can see what this has done is it has given me all of the metadata that I have within ACC. I have a link back to the files in ACC that I can access. And that takes me to my ACC environment. And to the relevant file, effectively, that I have, because that's the one that's linked here. We've just put placeholder files, so it won't, what's it called? But it takes me back to the file. It also gives me some metadata, like this is the date that it was created. What we've done as a company, and I think this is actually an important point to make, is we're coming up with the relatively standard schema for CDEs and what people need from them. So I have things like my document name or my container name. I have the description. I have a revision reference. I have a file extension. I have a URL. And I have the date that it was actually created, actual date. What we're also doing is we're taking every one of these files names and we're breaking them down into their component parts that make up the file name. So for example, this is the project. And you can see here, there is a formula very similar to an Excel-based formula that is taking that and is giving me the first section of it. And it's giving me demo one. This is giving me BTL as an originator. I made a fake data set earlier to like upload into ACC for the demo today. And I'll be showing you some things in a second. The reason why these are showing exclamation marks is because those don't match with the project setup. And once we go back in and adjust the project setup, we will see that the exclamation marks will disappear. I can also see the same thing for my spatial breakdowns. I can see the same thing for my disciplines. Now, I can then see my file number because again, we've parsed that. And then if I move to the right, I have some things that have a Thunderbolt icon next to them. And the reason those have a Thunderbolt icon next to them is because they're the ones that natively come out of ACC. So they mirror exactly what's in ACC and how ACC produces it, how ACC creates its schema. But really what we're trying to push towards is a level of standardization in that, because sometimes you'll be in Viewpoint or Aconex, and you want to have consistent reporting as an organization. Now, what I then want to do, you'll see different people will then do different things. And if you have any ideas on things where you would want, how you would want to create reports or reports that you would typically make, please do drop them down in the messages. But let's take a few examples. So one report that I know a lot of people make is they want to understand everything that's a drawing. They want to have a report for that of what has been uploaded for this, for example. So usually what you do is you pull all of that data into Excel, you then segregate the data, you'd make another table, which you'd call something like drawings list, for example. And then every time you need to go through that whole cycle over and over again. But because here we're building on a true database, what I can do is I can see I have a ribbon at the top, within which I have options like filter and sort. So what I've just done is I filtered on drawing. I now want to save this as a new view. I can click OK. And then off the back of this, I can now rename this and I can say, I want this to be called, sorry, what am I doing? Drawing list. And now I have this subset of my CDE documents, the list, that is only focused on drawings, for example. Now I may want to do some other reports. So if we go back to a view, just to be re-clarify, like a view is a subset of a table that has been pre-configured in a very specific way. What I also may want to see is I may want to see a group of all of my information by extension. Or I want to see all of the different companies that have uploaded data. So I can come and I can group this data. I can collapse this. And I want to have a count for each of these. For example, I can come here and I can say I want to see the number of rows per each. And then I want to save this as well as a new view. As mentioned, I'd love to have some input into some of the kinds of reports that you make off the back of what's in ACC. So I'd love for someone to like send a message in the chat of this is the kind of report that I usually make. Show me this, for example. Now you can see here, I've made that. I've set default collapse on load. And then now here I'm going to call this list by originator. And now you can see I have a predefined list of all of them that have been created by originator. Cool. If I wanted to, I can go back to my default view. I can go from my default view into my list by originator, and that's pre-configured to meet things in this specific way. Now, I quickly want to go back into my validations. This is showing an exclamation mark, right? And the reason it's showing an exclamation mark is there is a relationship Awesome. So there are two really good questions that have come in. Thanks, Ed. Can I compare information delivery plans against my design program made in P6 or Microsoft projects? Yes, you can. I will go into that briefly now. It was actually the whole call that I just had right before this. And then the second is, would the use of Morta negate the need for a document controller while using ACC? Yes, or a lot of the tasks that document controllers currently do manually, like what we're seeing is information managers are in many ways taking over a lot of document control, and it's all of this reporting can be automated. Yes. I've also seen, is it possible to report over different ACC projects? Yes, there are ways to do that, but I will not fully get into get into that in a second. So I'll be taking, thank you so much for people who are dropping in questions. Please do add more. It makes this much more enjoyable. Now, what you can first, let me just quickly continue on the audit front. You can see here, I have a select list from another data source, which is a project table. So I have a relationship between my CDE table and other tables that I have defined within the platform. Equally, I click on this here, I will see that this is a reference data functional breakdown table, because Morta is basically a relational database in many ways. So there are relationships between a lot of the Morta tables. If you've heard of things like SQL or Access, it's basically that with an Excel interface, so that people can interact with it. Now, I have these relationships, and what I can do with these relationships then is I can so this is saying it's wrong, and the reason for that, if I now go back to my information delivery plan, I have this table here, and you see the code that's been defined is MHQ. If I were to change that to demo 1, I'm going to call this demo, and I were to go back to my table, you will see the exclamation mark has disappeared. And the reason the exclamation mark disappeared is this is technically, like in this project, it is actually supposedly demo 1, so it is correct. Another reason why this here shows issues is, let's look at the list of originators. The list of originators is supposedly AFS, BTL, MEP, SLS, and STG. If I now go into my reference data for originators, I don't have any of these codes. So it will give me issues. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add BTL, MEP. Just going to delete those for today. AFS, SLS. I'm going to leave STG. I'm going to delete these. I can do things like bulk paste into Morta. I can do all of these things that people usually want. And I'm just going to go sample for all of these for now. And now I'm going to go back to my information delivery plan. So, sorry, I'm in the CDE documents, not in my information delivery plan. Now, again, here, you'll see now BTL is no longer an issue. STG is an issue, though, because we didn't add it. If I wanted to just view things that have issues, I could come here and I can filter on only show validation errors. And this will now only show me rows that have something that isn't compliant. So I'm just saving this as a view. And you can then see here, I'm going to call this validation errors. And this is only showing me the rows that actually have something that is non-conformant. So you can see this here, it's because of this. This here, it's because of this. So it's only showing me things that have non-conformities. Now, I That's a very big part of this. Now, the next thing that I quickly want to do is I'm just going to start creating a document, which is called CDE report. If I wanted to import, I have a document, a BIM execution plan, any of these things, and I have them on Word. I can import them. But now I'm just going to call validation issues. CDE documents and validation errors. And then the second one I'm going to add is originator list by account by originator. And I'm going to go, I want this to be list by originator, for example. And now you can see both of these are here. I have that list. I have my count by originator, exactly how I had set it up. Okay. Now, if I wanted to add some text here, I can. So I can go, this is my text. This is my count per originator. I wanted to color this. I can do that and so on and so forth. And then if I wanted to export this into Word, I can export it into Word as well, or I can export into Excel. Now, what I want to do next is I'm gonna do a very basic idea of a plan. It's like a very crappy one, but I'm just gonna do something on the go very quickly. I'm gonna assume for a second I need my deliverables by originator for a date. I just want something very simple right now, but you can import activities from P6. You can import, so I was just to answer that question very quickly. Community template. This is an example of a table that would be imported from P6 or MS projects or the like. So you can see this has an activity ID, an activity description, a planned start date, a planned finish date, activity man hours, weightage, and so on and so forth. So you can bring that in, but the concept will stand in what I'm about to show you now. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say add in a due date column. I'm going to set this as the date. I'm going to say BTL was due yesterday. MEP was due yesterday. This is technically due next week. And this is technically due next week. I wanted to take it a step further, and I really want to show this in a Gantt view, for example. I can come here, I can turn this into a Gantt. And I'm gonna go, I want the code. I'm gonna need a start date and end date. Let's just do end date, start date. So if I go back to my chart, I want this to be a Gantt. Start date, due date. You can now see I've turned my very basic plan into a Gantt view as well. Now, what I can do then, so now I've done that. I'm now going to go to my information delivery plan, or I'm going to go into, actually, we're just going to assume the plan is the originators table for now. I'm being reductionist, like we can have a whole session on that trail. But what I want to quickly do is build a relationship between, I want to build a relationship between my CDE data and my originators table, which has the data that we were looking for. I'm now gonna say I want this to be based on originator, and I want to add a condition for them to match. So if you used VLOOKUPs in Excel, this is very similar to that. I'm adding a due date, and I'm looking up that. If you use SQL, it's very similar to a join. I've now created this lookup. I now have here my due date for these. I want to move my due date so that it's next to the date created. Save this. Now you'll see next to each other, we have the reason why some are blank is that originator code doesn't exist, right? So this was the reason why this is blank. But you can see I now have both of these here, right? And then I can make a comparison between the two by adding a formula in Morta, which is very similar to Excel. I've never created a date formula before, but let's see how this goes. What do I want to do? I want date created. Let's see what date functions we have. Updated data user functions. Let's see if the minus will work. Actually, I'm just conscious of time, but let's see if this. Date created minus. Oh no, minus is date created, and date due date is the other one. That did work. So what we've done is the due date is the 11th. This is the 12th. And this was created a day later, basically, than what's it called? Than when it was due. If I wanted to, you can see here I have some that are negative and some that are positive. I can come and also do I shouldn't be filtering on date. This I want it to be a, let's see if number is better. Sure. Yeah, I'm gonna do the basic one. But if I could come here and say, I want anything that is, sorry, I just got disoriented. I want anything that is a negative to be highlighted. I can do that. And now I have this as a report that just shows me anything that has a negative date. So I can do these types of things as well. There was another question, which was around, and you can see, I hope, again, I'm not trying to do everything fully, but ultimately, like this is now predefined. I can define whatever logic I want, and I can go with that. It's very similar to building something on Excel, but ultimately what's happening is this is being built on a robust database. There was a question around, someone else asked about, it was Edward as well. Someone asked, can I actually, do I have role-based controls? Yes. you do. So what I can come and do is I can turn my originator column. I can turn that into a tag. I may not be able to because I've used it on a join. I'm just going to do something very quick now. Tag. Tag. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to assign myself as one of these originators. So I'm BTL. I'm now going to go back to my CDE documents. And I'm going to filter on something called tag values. I'm going to save this. And you can see here, I can now only see things that belong to BTL. I can assign permissions on a document level. I can assign them on a table level. I can assign them on a hub level. We have very sophisticated approaches to permissioning. But you could also see I can turn any of my trackers into something dynamic where people only see things that are relevant to them. And the most often ones that are used for role access are either discipline or originator, and then you work with that. One thing that I didn't show, and I just want to very quickly now do, is we've actually been investing also a lot more in reporting. You may want to create S-curves and things in Power BI, and you can do that. Any of the data is queryable via API in the platform. But what you can also do is you can create charts, and you can do that here by, for example, let's say by originator. I want to see a count of my documents. And I want, I have a filter here, which I'm going to remove. And now you can see I have this chart that shows me the number of deliverables each. I want to color this up. I can do that. So I can now put AFS, and I can say I want AFS to be green, for example. And now I have this. And I'm going to say this is count chart. And I'm going to go back to my report. And I'm going to add my count chart here.
I just say it's up 5 minutes.
Yeah. And I've now added my count chart here. I didn't save it. What am I doing? Bar chart, originator, save. Go back here, refresh this. You can now see the chart here. Now, just to basically to close it out, fundamentally a lot of the focus, because there was a question on organization level reporting. I hopefully I've covered. Stephen, thanks a lot for asking that. Yes, when it comes to document control, there are various aspects, but definitely when it comes to the reporting on that, I think that can be completely automated. There are also companies that are driving things like creation of documents and placeholders from the information delivery plan, and that ends up being useful. Comparison of deliverables against dates, 100%, Ed, like that's something that is very key and is very easy to do. And I hope you saw like how it approached that. You can extract program data automatically in Morta. So some are doing some of that. We're seeing like for detail planning, we end up being a really good place, but there are various ways of linking into ACC and into other systems. Is it possible to report on a project on an organization level? We support that. You usually do organization level reporting in Power BI. So an example of that would be if I were to go into my demonstrator here, you will see that I have a Power BI dashboard. This Power BI dashboard has S-curves, for example, and it's set up for all of my projects. But Morta has brought consistency to the way that data is collected. So I have my 3 projects. I have an S-curve. I can filter on my relevant project and I can understand KPIs on a high level. Role access control, yes, we do, and we support that. And then there is control over who's editing what and who's filling in what. So I hope you found this useful. Ultimately, the summary is you have all kinds of documents, you have all kinds of trackers. There are a million relationships between them. When someone tells you do a BIM execution plan, it's not about making your BIM execution plan easier. It's about data that's within the BIM execution plan and making that usable. And enabling that to be reused in other things. You have things like building regulations trackers, IDPs, QA/QC inspection trackers. Anything that you do in Word and Excel ideally moves to a truly data-driven platform that is connected and that is robust and that supports relationships. Thanks a lot for the comment, Pierre. Yeah, it's always very important to have relationships between data sets. And you should then be able to relate that to data that lives outside of Morta. We're not saying everything should be in Morta. Some of it will be in ACC, some of it will be in other systems. We connect to these other systems and we help you turn your plans into automated trackers that actually govern your project and make it much, much easier for you. So I hope you found this useful. If you have any questions, do get in touch. My email is mo@morta.io. If you feel like booking a meeting with me, you can also go in here and you can see at the very top, there is a request a demo. You could also jump directly into using the platform and trying it out, and then do get in touch. But yeah, I hope you found this useful, and it's been really, really good chatting with all of you today. And thanks for everyone who has asked a question, by the way. I really appreciate that. Have a good day, everyone.